When we feel stuck, at least my experience of getting in stuck places is that I question the worth of the project. If you're truly committing to a creative project, then the reason you're not writing is not because all the other stuff is happening. It's because I've learned over time that fear is where your compassion doesn't live yet, where I still judge myself and I lock compassion out of the room. Those are the places I'm afraid to go. What is true about writing, which is that it's just...
If you've struggled writing your memoir, this video is for you. Welcome to the Rising Author Experience. Today, my guest is a friend, a mentor, a Wall Street Journal best-selling ghostwriter, editor, book coach, and so much more. Emily Gindlesparger is not only a friend, but someone I truly admire and look up to. She has this amazing power of getting you to overcome your fear, learn what it is, and break it wide open. Emily is not only a guest, but she's a friend of mine, and I'm so excited to have her on my first episode of the Rising Author Experience. Let's jump in. Emily, how you doing?
I'm good.
So good to see you.
You too.
Emily, I want to go back in time just a little bit. I want to know what you remember from our first interaction when I came down to do the workshop to first start writing my book, but that group in general. What do you remember about? It was October 2019.
Oh, I remember because that cohort was like the most gelled I've ever seen a group of authors get. To this day, like still, no other group has matched that. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I'm not exaggerating when I say that I think that the gravity of your energy in particular was kind of what brought everybody together. Because I know you remember this like amazing moment in the room. We're all going around, we're talking about people's book ideas and why they're writing. And you at first had this, not exactly surface idea about why you were writing your book, but this kind of like easier to touch idea that it was for teachers to help students who were refugees. And as a former teacher, I knew, one, that mission is super important and awesome, but I could also just tell from your energy and the passion that you brought to this project that wasn't it. I just knew there was something else. Yeah. And so we started digging into like, okay, if we call bullshit on that, if we just say that that's not the reason, what's the other reason? Yeah. And there was one of those amazing moments that happens in groups sometimes where it's like all of the air just sort of got sucked into this, you as the center, and you were like, I'm writing it for my nephew so that he knows my story. That vulnerability, like the group was friendly and all of that before that moment, but that was the moment that really like unlocked the whole room and made it possible for everybody else to go to the level of depth that you just went.
I don't see it from that perspective because I feel like it was a combination of things. But that's what I wanted to go to. You helped me unlock that. You helped me kind of break why I was actually there. And I think at the surface level, when we all approach our creative work, whatever, we're trying to ensure that it meets a certain standard of like, commercial, like success, or like making sure that the person that you think you want to write it for will be pleased with the work or whatever. I think even at that point, right, like I still felt like a lot of gratitude towards a lot of my teachers when I was young. And I always felt for the younger refugee immigrant, because I was always that kid. But when you made it about, when you helped us like really go dig deeper, I realized that like, man, if I don't tell this story, my nephews are not going to know me or their grandfather or their grandmother, and they're just going to be disconnected, really following my creative pursuits like this.
Yeah. So amazing.
I want to let people know about your story a little bit and how you got further into the world of publishing, not only because you want to write your book, but your passion for helping others bring their ideas to life.
Yeah, a lot of it is luck for sure, and some of it was just kind of bullying my way into the spaces where I saw cool things happening. A real brief background, like I graduated with a writing degree that's kind of useless, tried to make a go as a freelance magazine writer, never got high profile enough to get seriously paid with any of that, became a teacher, and then jumped ship from teaching into the publishing industry. And the company that Tucker Max founded, Scribes, we worked together. And he started doing these workshops with authors, and I initially wasn't part of that part of the company or that program at all, but I just heard about the first one and I was like, you guys, you're just not allowed to have this without me. Like, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care what it is. I'm going to figure out how to kind of get myself in that environment, even though I wasn't invited. It wasn't part of my role. It's not what I was supposed to be doing. But I basically just went straight to Tucker and said, hey, this looks so awesome.
Yeah.
I want to learn how to help people in the way that I see you helping people. And he let me be in the room. And at first it was like, I think the first workshop that I went to, I paid my own plane ticket to get there.
Wow.
Like I didn't have any official duties. I was literally just a fly on the wall.
Yeah.
And it was really awesome to get the opportunity to just absorb and learn that way. And really kind of apprentice for him in a really classic sense, like watch him work.
Yes.
Because he is, as you know, so good and targeted with like finding the right question that helps people challenge whatever the current narrative in their mind is.
Yes.
And it's actually, it's like, it's not even the question that's the important thing. It's the getting the person to challenge, because then it doesn't matter if the track and the story you were telling yourself is right or wrong. Like the challenge will help you sort out whether you want to go into the story deeper or whether you were actually chasing the wrong story.
Right.
And so, you know, that's what I saw happen with you, was like you were staying at this level, and so many authors do this. It's not a bad thing. You're staying at this level where you can see and describe a clear benefit, right?
Yes.
If I can get my book in the hands of teachers, then I know it will do good because I know they have student, you know, and what happens when we pin our desire on that like more commercial or easier to understand objective is that then sometimes we totally miss like the deeper drivers that if we let those breathe are going to make like fill out the soul in the work, so to speak. I did the same thing with my book. I started writing my memoir thinking, oh, well, I got in this weird relationship spot and I know other people suffer with relationships and I want them to not suffer. So like I have to write this book because it's the way that this weird and uncomfortable part of my life will have a sense of purpose now. And I'm glad for that initial motivation because it got me into the project and it got me most of the way through. But in the end, I had to kind of put up my hands and say, that's obviously, I hope the story will help people, but I got into it for me. And if I lean into telling the story that I need to tell myself and really like looking at myself and my truth, then I'm going to get what I need out of it. And I did. Yeah. And then it helping other people is sort of a byproduct.
So when I went deeper with the cause of the book and why I actually wanted to write it, it fulfilled me so much that I honestly don't even look to speak anymore.
Right?
I always felt that burden of like guilt. Like, oh, I was a little kid. I wasn't going to drag around buckets of water. Like, you know, I did what I did. I was being funny. I was cute. I was drawing. I was, you know, entertaining my siblings, but I just never felt like I could repay them, nor did they ever need me to repay them, right? Like that was just in my head. But when I was speaking and building my business and just like going 100 miles an hour doing these things, like when I was up in Portland, I just felt like I want to prove to these beautiful individuals that all their sacrifice was worth it. And when I finished writing the book, I felt so healed. You know what I mean? I felt like I finally closed that wound of like needing to ensure that they know I'm appreciative, because they've always known. I found myself in this like, I got to get out of this printing world, and I felt like I was contributing more of a mess to the world. And I always felt this deep connection to, you know, my Arab heritage, scholars, the golden age. You know, we've talked about these conversations before. And I was like, this is so cool. There's so many people out here that want to write books. I was like blind to this whole world of book writing. It's blind. So when you asked me to come join and like be a part of, lead the community and like do all that stuff and be a part of the workshops, I was like literally hanging out with like elite scholars in my perspective. And I got to not just be a fly on the wall, I got to like be immersed and given permission to help in any way that I could. So you dragged me into that, and I love you for it. So thank you.
Well, it wasn't just permission, right? Like you were the perfect person for that, because you've not only been through the journey of And I mean like committed to the deep internal journey of writing a book and really deeply considering what it is that you're trying to offer to yourself in your book and what you're offering to other people isn't to knock that at all, but go through the book writing process just thinking of it in much more practical terms. And they never really touch those deeper parts themselves. And sometimes it's because their book isn't really about deep stuff. Like they're just teaching, I think,
a method.
The driest book I ever helped someone out with, how to set up a business selling warehousing space, right? Like there's not a lot of emotion in that, for me at least.
Yeah.
But like you went through all of it as someone who did not identify as a writer in the first place, and then grew to understand what is true about writing, which is that it's just good, clear communication. It's just one way to connect with people. And when you let go of this idea of like what good writing is supposed to look like or how your grammar is supposed to be or any of that stuff.
Yes.
When you actually let go of that, then you can focus on what really matters, which is like, what are my ideas? What am I contributing? How can I be as clear as possible with what it is that I'm trying to give? And you focused on that, and that's why your writing is great. Without you ever like pursuing a writing degree, right? Like some of us don't catch those lessons as quickly.
Yeah, no, totally. And I'm glad you brought that up, because a lot of, I got caught up in that, right? Like my grammar, my spelling. Oh, like what was, like we talked about it, and we're going to talk about that next, is like, what was your biggest fear? Like that was my favorite part of the workshop, right? Was like the fear part. And I definitely visualize and see my fear way differently than I ever did before before, during, and after. But like you helped me hone in on this idea that, no, dude, like, what are you trying to say? Like grammar, all that stuff is great, but there are like apps for that. There are editors.
There's AI.
There's AI. There's so many tools.
You don't need to use your brain.
What are you trying to say? And that was the crux, right? What's the first thing you try to educate people on when they're entering that world of writing memoir?
I mean, the biggest thing that comes to mind is that I've learned over time that fear is where your compassion doesn't live yet. Right? Like, especially when it comes to writing parts of your own story, I'm not afraid to go the places where I know I can love myself once I get there. It's the memories where I am ashamed of my actions, or I feel guilty about something, or I feel really upset about how I didn't show up for someone, let's say. It's that kind of stuff where I still judge myself and I lock compassion out of the room. Those are the places I'm afraid to go. Right? And so I really think of writing practice as not being about writing hardly at all. It's actually about, for me, a meditative practice, or if meditation doesn't connect with you, it's just a practice of making space to go into the places that you haven't brought your love with you, and then go try to sit there for a while and see what happens. And in my experience, art is usually the natural result of like going through that process.
Beautiful. When I struggled with that fear, I remember you telling me something really unique, which is, what do you remember from that perspective? But if you were to go back in time as you are today, what would you tell your younger self? How would you sit with your younger self? And that's how I was able to bring that compassion, right? It's that traveling back in time with the tools that I have now, and not going back in time in a memory where I didn't have the tools.
Yeah.
And being frustrated in that moment. And, so much judgment, so much, but like you said, you're not bringing something along with you that you may have now, or maybe you need to go cultivate that first. Hey, quick time out. I just want to say thanks to our sponsor, who is absolutely nobody, except for all my friends at Patreon. If you want to support the podcast show, please just hit subscribe, hit the like button. That's the best way to help us. If you want to visit rising-authors.com, right now you can join the community for free. And if you feel like you want to support, you can jump onto my Patreon page and support the podcast, support the tour that we're going to be doing really soon. And we have so many amazing episodes lined up, so you want to stay tuned for that. Other than that, let's get back in the episode.
A lot of times I don't have that compassion yet. I'm writing because how do I get there?
Yeah.
And so this time travel analogy of like, you're taking your present self and you're going back in time to your past self. So there's two members there. I often take a third member with me, which is my future self,
Yes.
who I can imagine as like the
Yeah.
best possible version of me, the most fulfilled, the most gracious, the most compassionate. And sometimes I borrow from her and ask her, like, hey, can we just all three get into the room of this memory? And I don't know what to write, but the past self of me can at least write, if only in bare reportage form. She can write what happened, and she can write what she thought, and she can write what she felt. Sometimes present me still doesn't know what to do, but future me can look at that and say, yeah, I still got you. I can figure out how to love you. And I actually think that the very act of writing these things out, I don't think writing is the be all end all medium, but it is for me because it's the clearest way that I process things. It lets me put it down so that there's a mirror in front of me.
Sure.
And regardless of what I think of myself when I see that reflection, let's say I'm still judging myself, just the act of witnessing changes my approach to myself. And so, like, past me writes the version, present me looks at it, future me tries to help the two of us deal with that. And the more that I repeat that, the reflection goes from, okay, maybe I was judging myself negatively, then it gets to neutral, and then eventually compassion wins out, right? But it's often the process of coming back to it and rewriting and editing that's actually the more healing part of the journey than just doing the first draft of it.
I don't even know how to express how beautiful you laid that out, because it's literally how you taught me to like see myself in such a beautiful light, right? Like going back to that refugee camp, which is what I wrote a lot about, was really hard, like really hard. And I found myself stuck in a lot of ways, you know, and it was because I just felt guilt and shame and wishing I could have done more or something, like as if I could have changed anything. Right. But, you know, having that perspective of like, no, let's just like look at it for what it is. And then maybe the next one, and like really just pulling the thread apart one day at a time, one sentence, one paragraph, how I was able to get unstuck in the moments of like, who cares about this part of the story? Like how many people have you worked with, right? Like, I don't care about this part of the story. I'm just going to skim over it. But you know, like, no, bro. That we can't make the bridge will not happen if you don't write this part. I can't get the reader across.
Yeah.
Right. And that was such an important part of not just writing, but again, the healing, you know. And I think getting unstuck is really like the matter of like, you need to lay in bed and like think this through in a way that can heal you. And that took some time, you know, because I never thought about going to write or even paint or whatever as a healing process. But once I understood it, then I realized what my brothers were doing. What we're trying to get to healing, and the paths take you in different routes in different ways. But the ultimate healing for me was just like, and then running with it. And then I really got into running. I remember telling you that part, right? Like, I would get on the call and I'd be sweaty and stuff. Like, I'm just processing, man. Like, I decided I had to expel that energy. So while I was running, I was thinking about what I wanted to write. And in that, something about my physicality, I think, and like the thinking of it and like expelling that energy and feeling the anger. So today I tell people, like, you want to heal, yes, get a therapist and all, like do all the things, but also write or paint or something. Like, you gotta expel it out of your surface area, if you will. And that's one way you can deal with it. Because then it will look back at you and then you realize, like, okay, this was a part of me. Now it's over here. And I can deal with that and at least create some space between me and that story so that it doesn't consume me all the time. That was, again, like, huge. I mean, I'm not the first person, because I know a lot of people who have worked with you. Literally, I know a lot who all relate to that story of like going to the depth. And so it's like, there's no scuba gear. You don't offer any of that. We're going to the depth. Like, okay, hold on a second. We're going to take a time out. I want to talk about this idea of, you know, just getting stuck. Like, we all do. I do. I've been stuck in a way in my second book now for a couple of months, and a lot of reasons. It's really outside of the writing, because work life stuff. I know you're going to call me out, but that's okay. I think I need you to. But like, I want to explore this a little bit, because there's a lot of people who, especially with memoir, especially that deep stuff. And I know there was a time where you really struggled with your book, you know? So I want to talk about that a little bit and how you started to overcome it.
With my first book, and honestly, I'm in a spot with my second book, my current one, where I'm stuck again too. So like, it's not like you ever figure out your portal out of the stuck and then it never happens again. Like, you got to prepare as a creative, you got to prepare yourself for like just a lifetime cycle of stuck and unstuck and stuck and unstuck. But I know for sure that I'll pick on you because it's easier than being vulnerable with me. But what you said about like life and work and all the other things are getting in the way, or they're taking the priority. Like, that's happening with me too. That's the current excuse I'm leaning on. I'm not really digging into my book. And the reality is that those things are always going to exist.
Yes.
They're always going to put pressure on you, right?
Yes.
So if you're truly committing to a creative project, then the reason you're not writing is not because all the other stuff is happening. It's because you're not prioritizing your creative project and you're not deliberately creating the space that it needs, because we always have to do that. And so on my first book, there were a couple of really big points where I got stuck. And the first one was, I actually did a pretty decent job maintaining momentum throughout doing my first draft and doing my edits. I got a little stuck there, as you know, you're reading through your story and you're like, this sucks, I did a bad job, and there's all that self-judgment going on. I find that easier to get through. This is kind of a cop-out in terms of advice for other people, but I find it a little easier to get through as now that I'm a professional writer, because I can just take my own project and compare it to what would I do if this wasn't my work, but work that I was doing for someone else. And it's like, for someone else, I can bang out a book draft in a month. I can get that thing edited in 2 weeks. I can finish revisions with somebody in a couple of months, right? So how do I hold the same standard for my own work? And sometimes it's about doing what the authors that work with me have to do, which is like, you have to recognize that the book is its own entity that's growing and evolving. And it's never going to be exactly the vision that you set out to make. Just like a tree is never going to grow into the same shape that you had in your mind when you pictured a tree in your backyard and planted one, right? Like, it's going to grow on its own. And so for me, there's this constant like looking at the project at face value and accepting it for what it has turned into, and then trying to make that the best it can be, rather than constantly fighting what it has grown into to try to make it the original vision. I think that you constantly have to let go and sometimes mourn all the possibilities of what your book could be, so that you can shape it into something that will actually become real and get out into the world. Because you can spend a lifetime polishing one piece of work.
So I love this idea that, like, okay, in order to overcome the obstacle, right, whatever that obstacle is, the stuckness, the whatever, is to sort of represent it to yourself in a way that's like, is this a priority? Do you really want to do this? Get serious and treat it like a professional. Make time for it, prioritize it, and commit to it. You remind me of it. Just hanging out with you remind me how important my creativity is. So,
well, same. That goes two ways.
Yeah.
There's a piece to add too, I think, on this idea of like treating your work like a professional, which is that when we feel stuck, at least my experience of getting in stuck places is that I question the worth of the project. And when the project is me writing my own story, that's deeply connected with my own self-worth as well, right? And so, like, this is a journey that I'm still on. But I know that spending the time with myself, which is spending the time that I need to sit with the parts of me that need to be witnessed, in addition to spending the time writing, because sometimes those are separate tasks that I have to do one at a time.
Yeah.
When I pay attention to how those practices improve my life, I can notice really insane benefits in terms of like how present I am with other people, how well I can speak my mind, how well I can hold my boundaries. Like, that all comes from, that literally came from writing about my relationships. I ended up having some of the biggest career booms of my whole life while I was like in deep, like sobbing in my office, like deep terror writing my story. And it was because I was willing to confront that in myself, and it made me a lot bolder and also a lot more confident in the other areas of my life because I knew myself so much better. And so it's like, how do you recognize the worth of a project like that, even if the output changes? Days where your writing is good, and then you go and turn around and read the whole thing and you're like, I don't even have a story here, right? Like, how do you hang on to the intrinsic self-worth in yourself and in that project, even when the results, not like anybody building a business is confronted with? It's the same question that anybody creating anything is confronted with. And ultimately what we have to do to get out of it, what I've learned is like, if I'm feeling stuck, it's because I'm having a worth crisis right now. And that's really what I need to make clear some space and spend some time and sit with, is like, what is worth it to me?
That just hits the nail on its head. And I noticed it in you when you were writing your book, like how much deeper our conversations got, you know, just from when, like, in mentorship, you know, because I would come to you and be like, dude, I'm struggling with this, or I feel this kind of way about this author. And you're like, do you? How do you feel about yourself? You know, like, it was such a deep, reflective moments that I picked up from you along that mentorship. I learned so much about myself, not just through writing my book, really hanging out with you and Chaz, and just you calling me out on my shit, which this is what I want to talk about next, is like, you sort of, you know, after the Scribe stuff that went down, unfortunately, we all kind of had to find a new path, and I really wanted to keep the community going. I love that community aspect. I love this. I loved, you know, the opportunities that I got to hang out with authors one-on-one, and so I wanted to, like, continue that and figure out ways to continue that, and I feel like I did, alongside Chaz and a few other people that, when things went, you know, sideways, we figured it out. How are you continuing that work?
Yeah, it was interesting. That all of the events of the company collapsing and then birthing itself.
Sure.
When I left, I really went into like a cocoon phase, which surprised me because the one thing that I also loved so much was working with authors and being in community. And I'm, you know, it's still new enough that I don't know the reasons why I needed to just like kind of hole up and not think about it, really feel my way through, like, how do I want my time to be spent? And so I moved so glacially slowly. Like, I started my own business, which really just meant I took on a couple of clients that I already knew that I loved, and started working on really awesome, deep projects with them. You know, learned all the things that you learn in a business, which is like, how do I even portray myself to the world? Like, that was something I never had.
How do I build a website, invoice you? Yeah.
Yeah, so there's like a huge, steep learning curve there.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of like introspection just in figuring out how to pull all of that together. It's really interesting, the timing of these things, because I was just on the cusp of looking at my 2024 ahead. This was like end of the year of 2023, and realizing like, okay, I have enough work lined up for myself to last about half the year, which means I have a 6-month runway to try to generate more business. And I'm terrified of that. I don't know what I'm doing with marketing. I don't know how to do anything. I knew I needed to start making video content and just like get more comfortable being out in front of people. Because you know me, I'm great in a workshop setting.
Sure.
When there's a closed container and it's like, we are all here for this one purpose, I am on. That's the kind of environment that lights me up. But the one to many, 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 many situation, it just terrifies
in public,
me.
It terrifies a lot of people. So,
And I was really lucky that Tucker, out of the blue, well, not out of the blue, I'm sure he'd been thinking about it for a while, but he put together a memoir mastermind group because he wanted to finish his own book. He was dragging his ass on it and wanted motivation, and was like, well, if I just get a bunch of people paying me money to help them with their books, then like I can't back out. So he starts this thing, and
which he's just the master at that, Tucker.
So I know, like he can just do that in sleep, right? Of course. And what I saw him building was what I wanted to be building for myself, but I wasn't confident enough that I had the reach I needed to pull in like only memoir content and really hyper focus there. And so luckily he reached out to me and said like, hey,
let's join forces.
yeah, this is what we had been working on when we worked together previously, and now we had the freedom to really build it exactly the way that we wanted. And so that's what we're doing now, is a memoir company, helping people write their books. Eventually we'll also have a publishing arm to that so that we can publish them in-house, but of course we can consult with people on whether they traditionally publish or go elsewhere. And so
very cool.
and it's been so amazing. Like it is really one of those life moments where I feel like, oh, all the puzzle pieces are finally here, and like I see the picture. I get it. This is what I've been working toward. It's that aligned with where my heart has always been, and I'm just so grateful that I get the privilege to really focus in on it.
I love that you really stepped into that light. I know these are the moments that have all sort of added up in a weird way to like get you here, but it's really where I'm so happy for you, because it's like the perfect environment for you to continue flourishing as a person, not only as like a memoir writer and all those things, but as a person that's going to help a lot of people bring their stories out. Where can people reach out to you to get, contact you? How do they get a hold of you to get in this memoir mastermind to help them with their work?
So the easiest way to find me is to email me at emily@emilygindlesparger.com.
Beautiful. And they can find you on LinkedIn.
They can find me on LinkedIn, Emily Gindlesparger, and I'm also Emily Gindle on Instagram.
Beautiful.
And if you don't know how to spell my last name, just do your best
I'll put in the show
into
notes.
Google, and I've tested it with many different misspellings. I still pop up. The name is weird enough. It's pretty easy to find on the internet.
Great. Is there anything else you want to add to the wonderful audience here that's all learning from you and have been anticipating this episode? Because I've been talking about this shit for like a year. So I can't wait. And you better be watching and subscribing right now. But is there anything else you want to add to?
I mean, are you ready for me to open a can of worms and like prod at you about where your resistance is lying right now?
Yeah, let's do it. This is the mentorship I'm telling you guys about. This is the real. I wasn't ready. See, the camera was like, we're done. We're not doing this. So at the end of the episode, Emily helps me unlock my truth as to why I haven't been writing. So for the past year, I have been deep into building the Rising Author sort of business and agency and community and trying to develop this podcast show. So I honestly have put my book on the back burner for many reasons. However, Emily is fantastic at extracting exactly why I have been stuck. So this last part is really about a mentorship moment between me and Emily, where she really helps me unlock why I haven't been writing and getting to the bottom of that and really confronting that. This is what Emily is remarkable at. I highly encourage you to watch it and maybe pick up a few things to learn as to how you can get unstuck with your work, especially if you're writing a memoir or just a nonfiction book. Going through this and just watching it here in the editing, I've relearned why Emily is so remarkable at what she does. And again, if you are feeling a little bit stuck or not sure what to do with your memoir or how to tell that story, watch this next segment. I'm sure it's very helpful for you. Here. Okay.
Would it help if I
there we go.
Shift some?
Yeah. All right. So this camera died. This battery's pretty much dead. This fan is dead. We're cooking. We're in a sauna right now. Okay. We're in Tucson, Arizona. We're getting friggin' sweat. Literally, this is the sweat tank. This is the kind of shit Emily puts me through. This is a bonus. This is bonus material. She's about to coach me through my stuckness. And this is literally how this stuff goes with Emily. She's remarkable, but yes, I'm ready.
I mean, maybe I can
I'm ready. I'm ready. See. I knew this was coming. I didn't think it was going to happen, but I knew it was coming. But yeah, talk to me.
Yeah. Well, so you said life is getting in the way. And we talked about like, when you're not writing, it's actually just a sign that you're not prioritizing it. Like, what is it the truth for you that this isn't a priority right now, or is it something else?
Like before Scribe's stuff that went down, I was writing. I was in it. I was like day to day. I was documenting. It took the wind out of me. You know what I mean? Because I was really like, I just felt like this energy just... But a new energy came in, right? Which was like, I felt a sense of freedom again, because I love being an entrepreneur. I love this creative flexibility, that I can take control of my own website. I can help you the way I think you need help in the marketing and the what. Like, there was so many things I wanted to do, but I felt like under the umbrella of Scribe that I like, okay, well, I could put that on for later, but let me just focus on writing a book because I can get the benefit of publishing another book for free, technically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that was huge. And so there was that sense of pressure, but then there wasn't a whole lot of other pressure. But then, honestly, it became like, oh my God, I need to make money, like to survive, to live, and to support myself and my wife, you know? And so since then, I totally put it on a back burner. I wrote here and there, like, you know, kept coming back to it in expressing my frustration. So I was kind of documenting my frustration and my anger and so it was a great way to release. But then that's what I felt like it was. It was just like a journal of like, fuck this is frustrating, you know, how am I going to build this business? Who's going to believe in me? I'm a guy named Hussein. Like, you know what I'm saying? I didn't even, you know, because I thought I was going to be with Scribe for like another 5, 10 years, you know what I mean? To like really build, yeah. Like to really build a reputation in a way that, you know, I'm like, you know, what do I, you know, all the shame stuff started coming up, all my voices of like, oh man, I'm not good enough. But then something shifted. Literally, I let that brew for like a couple of days, you know, and I came over and I told you, like, you know, I was like, I'm feeling like shit right now, but fuck it. I'm gonna, like, at this point, I have nothing to lose. And my family and I have lost everything before. I know what that's like. So I can't go back to that place. We're living in a tent in the desert. I mean, technically we are in a tent right now.
But we are not in a tent. We are in a van.
Which, funny enough, like these specific vans, they used to open up the back and throw toys out of them in the refugee camp, which is why I got this van. It's a reminder to me.
Wow.
So literally, like we would chase these things around the refugee camp on Eid, which we're in Ramadan right now. And yeah, that would be the time we get soccer balls or toys, and it was an interesting time. So my thing is like, it's not that I don't want to write. It's like I know my next book is, I think, even more powerful than the first one, because I have a lot of shit I didn't say in the first one, and I kept out of it for a reason. But my thing is like, it wasn't like life getting in the way. It was just like, shit, I got to get my financials together. I got to build this little business. I got to convince other people that I'm good at this thing, you know, building websites, helping them market, grow their audience. Like, because I always felt like I was pretty good at that.
You are.
And like,
yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I had to feel like I had to create ways to convince others that I can. Mm-hmm. And so by using testimonials, rebuilding my website, and I was spending hours. Like we turned around that circle community in like a week, fast. And I was in freaking Fiji with my wife trying to vacation.
I know.
So I was like, you know, I had to just throw it all in the back burner.
Yeah.
You know, and that for me, I was okay with that because I had a new energy that I needed to like take on, and really, I honestly, this is the way I describe it to my wife. I felt like I needed to take my sword out of its sheath, you know, and just like go to battle with this world, right? And I know it sounds weird, but now, like literally now that things are processing, things are moving, business is in a good place, you know, people are reaching out, like I'm riding this nice wave. I'm feeling good about wanting to come back to it, right? Because now I can express hope again in the writing. And I feel like I documented enough shit that the book is about that. It's about continuing this fire. You know, it's about people who have the spark. We all have a spark. You know, we talked about this just a minute ago, like before we started. Like, that's what I believe. It's like this book is really about, how do I keep this fire going? How do I keep my creative flow going? And it's really up to us. Like, we have to go out there. We got to hunt. We got to go get the wood. We got to get the fuel. We got to go meet people. We don't like, you know what I'm saying? And bring back to the fire so that you can keep people coming to it. You know what I'm saying? This base camp idea.
Yeah, I love that.
So, yeah, in a way, I don't know, that was the longest answer ever. But in a way, like, that's how I feel about why I had to put it on the back burner.
Yeah.
But I, you know.
So what about
So
now?
yeah. Now I'm ready to write, because now she solved everything.
Just by being here, I don't even have to say anything anymore.
Like, this is
Just
the benefit of working with Emily. I'm telling you, it is the, you know, you do have that, though. You have such an energy of, like, you know, what you said, you know, what about now? I don't have an excuse right now, to be honest with you. I can get up at 6 in the morning and spend a hour writing.
But hang on. Saying I don't have an excuse is actually, like, kind of dismissive of the part of yourself that hasn't restarted, right? Yeah. So let's assume, just for the sake of shits and giggles, let's assume that any possible reason that you are not writing right now, like yesterday, today, is legitimate, fully warranted and necessary in this moment. What is the necessary reason that you haven't picked it back up yet?
For real?
Yeah.
I feel like I don't have the audience that I want.
There we go.
Yeah. You know, I feel like I have a lot to say about some deep shit, and I don't know why. I don't know why I don't think I have enough platform or audience or whatever. And maybe that's something I need to work through, you know, in my writing too. And I feel like maybe for a while I was trying to use it as a way to attract clientele, or like use it as an opportunity. And then that's where our conversation went, right? It was just like, when we do that, you're taking away the breath, the spirit of what the thing is. And I think I got sort of upset with myself that I was doing that again, you know, and I didn't know where to channel that energy. So I put it in my business where it belongs, right? Like, hey, in order to attract business, like, go do it in a business fashion. But the book, it's literally Memoir 2.0. It's not that you can't have that. It's just like, it's not where it belongs. So yeah, I think it was just like about like, oh, I don't have enough audience, I don't have enough whatever, and
which, like, is legitimate, yeah, right? And of course you don't.
Yeah.
You haven't released this book yet. You don't. Yeah. You know, like, what part inside of you are you writing the book for? Who is the book for?
I think it's sort of my second part of life. Like, I feel like it was like my college and building a small business years, like how excruciating it was. And the reason it was excruciating was because of so much judgment, shame, and, you know, chip on my shoulder. I got shit to prove. And that, honestly, love you, mama, but it comes from my mom. And my mom didn't come up a lot in my first book for this reason, right? And so I think because my mom and I have a better relationship now, I'm unsure how to write it and explore that side of me, you know, that was really angry, frustrated, and constantly. Not that she, like, because I felt like in a way I was blaming her.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, you know, I know the reasons, right? But today, you know, it's that whole going back in time with compassion. It's like, now I visit my mom in those memories and I have so much compassion for her that it's hard to write the things that I want to say, you know, from that time frame, right? So that's my battle. And I think genuinely it's where I got stuck, of like, the first one was definitely for my dad, and it was because he passed on. And it was like a thank you, but also a reflection, and it was me trying to heal that
and preserve a legacy,
and 100% preserve him, you know, in my spirit. this one is still fresh, you know, like the wound and everything. I'm still trying to heal that and like get the therapy for that and like microdose for, you know, like all the things, so that I can go there a little bit deeper and tell it how it was and how it is, you know, and because she taught me so much from so many different angles that my father couldn't have taught me. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get there's parts of me that come from my dad and parts of me from my mom, but yeah, I think this one is definitely wrapped around, you know, what a young man wants to do for his mom, how he wants to protect her, love her, and all those things. But then it's the, you know, it's everything that comes with that. As a lot of young men feel what I feel with their mother, you know, and I'm exploring that, you know, and the book started out that way, and then it just, she taught me about the garden warrior, you know, she was the one that taught me about, you know, cultivating, taking things slowly, you know, really, but also she had a lot of her own shit. Her dad, you know, all her things, all her trauma, and that everything got ripped away from her. Her home, her children, her uncle, her this, that everything was just constantly being torn away. That she did everything in her power to keep us as close as I can. And of course, that suffocates you, that hurts you, that damages you, that, you know, but I get it. That's the thing now, right? It's like, it's almost like I'm healing through it, but just by reflecting on it. But the writing, that's where I got stuck. It was like chapter 3, chapter 4, I really needed to say some shit about my mom, you know, and it hurt to say it.
Yeah.
So there it is, folks.
I get that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I'll explain my own perspective before asking the next leading question. But like, I've noticed that sometimes when I get stuck, it's often because I'm writing about another person and I am grappling with how to be both honest. Really, I'm grappling with how to be honest, which means taking full responsibility for my perspective, my emotions, my actions, not blaming the other person, even when I want to, right? And that shit is hard. It's just really hard. And sometimes the way that I get through that is to first write the draft that says all the awful things that I know are not true, that I don't actually intend to say, but I need to like externalize that.
Get it out.
Yeah, I need to externalize it so that then I have the mirror again and I can look at that and say, yeah, that the feelings of that are true, but the way that I've logicked it out, the way that I've added judgment to this, the way that I've carried shame with this, that's not true, right?
Yes.
And so it's only when I see the reflection of that first version that then I can write a next version that is maybe neutral or maybe a little bit more true. And I really see drafting and redrafting as like reclaiming my humanity one pass at a time. And so the leading question I was going to ask you was like, are there conversations you feel you need to have with your mom in order to go where you need to go? And you don't have to answer that like in public, right? But knowing the answer to that question will help you know, okay, then is this a time to focus on talking to my mom? Or is this a time to focus on writing down what I know I don't want to say because I know that it's not really the truth yet, so that I can get to what like it'll help you clarify where the center of the writing is for you. If it's getting locked up in the relationship, then sometimes sometimes that's a mirror to show us like, okay, I'm not being honest fully or not fully owning some part of my relationship with the person I'm writing about. Or maybe I'm just on the path of working through all the complexity that's wrapped up in that, and I need to give myself greater permission to write the wrong versions of that story,
Right.
because I know that many different facets combine to make the full picture, and sometimes I can only write one facet at a time.
Right.
Sometimes I can only write the anger at one time,
Yeah.
because the anger is the only thing I haven't let myself fully feel, and so I've been carrying it, and it's the only thing I can see.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a good question. Yeah, I don't have the answer for that right now, but you're right. And I, I think we're just getting to the bottom of like why I've been stuck. And it's really like, yeah, it's not the audience, it's not, all these components. It's really like, yeah, how can I be honest here?
Yeah.
And also, don't blame myself, don't blame her, just say it for what it is, and then grow out of that. That's been and then, intertwining that with this really deep story of this garden warrior ideology and sort of methodology and, culture, religion, all those things, and how they all played a role, and where that got shattered, in our culture. And then how our moms are the sort of connection to that, but it's hard to get through to the mom, right? It's hard to allow them to teach us, because there's this void, this anger, frustration, and it's like, how can I express to you how I feel without you getting angry? Because you know what I mean? It's this kind of back and forth energy. And I opened the book with one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. It's like literally the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And it was something I said to my mom, and I think I'm still grappling with that in a lot of ways. You know what I mean? Like, how could I have said that? How could I have done that? And it took a lot of courage and all these things, right? And to muster it up and bring it out. But I think in a lot of, when I got there in chapter, I think 4, I felt so much shame around it that I kind of put it down and was like, okay, I'll have to revisit this. Like, this needs whatever unlocking. So I wrote 5, 6, and 7, and then just still had my thoughts on the first, the chapter. And yeah. This is why this woman's so good with what she does. This is what you'll get. You'll get the depth. But no, I appreciate that. That really helps kind of bring it back to where it's not hooking up right.
And I know that kind of sticking point is going to resonate with people. That's where I'm at with my book right now, right?
Yeah.
Like, the second book that I'm writing, I'm at a certain point where I am attempting to write about a loved one going through depression. And so there's all of these questions of like, what part of that story is mine to tell and what is definitely not mine, right? To carry or to tell. And how do I recognize that my reaction or my response to this loved one, of course it's about them and my love for them, but it's also about like, what am I not claiming inside of myself, right? Like, I've struggled with depression too. Why am I focusing on someone else's struggle with depression instead of zeroing in on a point of my own, right? And so, so for me as well, there's this dance I'm doing back and forth where I'm trying to understand like what in the relationship needs to move, because clearly I need to talk about that with this loved one in a way that we haven't talked about it before. And what in me needs to move so that I can really fully be responsible for how I showed up at that period of my life and what meaning I'm making of it now, right? And so, like, those were all very legitimate reasons to be stuck. And in fact, allowing yourself to not write while you're figuring out or feeling your way through what piece needs to move, I think that's actually better than this like beat the resistance, show up with discipline every day, right through it, right? Like you may not get the right answer if you rush through and try to write it.
Right.
Unless it's the kind of thing where you know writing is going to be part of the processing of the thing, in which case then the solution is don't think about it as writing your book. Think about it as I'm going to write the story of this thing, and I don't know whether it's going to make it in the book or not. I'm just going to write it the way that I need to see the reflection right now.
Yeah.
And I'll figure out later what to do.
That brings me back directly to when I submitted my first book. And I remember telling you this. I wrote a story of that thing that happened at the camp. And I was kind of running 3-4 miles a day those months. And when I wrote that story, it was literally like 3 paragraphs. I just said it, right? And what happened. And I ran like 12 miles that day. Like I was like 5 a.m, I wrote it and whatever, and I was like, I'm gonna go for a run. Like that felt so good to get out of my system, and I just kept running and like I felt genuinely lighter. Like I literally felt like I weighed less, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And my mom called me. She was in Mecca just recently. She was like literally at the house of God, right? Like at the Kaaba. And she's like, I was just thinking about you. I love you. And I was praying for you. And it was just so fucking beautiful. And I just like stopped for a moment and was just so grateful. And I felt that sense of lightness. Because that's always been there.
Yeah.
But I allowed this other shit to get in the way and not let her love seep through for what it is. Yeah. But I felt light again, and I felt so much love back for her, and so grateful that I have her. And despite all the bullshit, like for real, it felt so good to have someone love you so much. And it's my right, it's my privilege, to have someone love me like that. And I guess I never knew. That's what I mean. It's like I felt complete. I was like, I don't even know if this book is.
Do I need it?
Yeah, if I can feel this,
yeah.
What's the point? Really, like it just felt so good. I'm like, this is what I want. I want this love forever. And if anything, I want to write the book just like I kind of wrote it for my dad, as a way of thanking her, like through the pain, and it's like, I wrote this the other day, and it's like, I listen to Tupac's Dear Mama sometimes because it just resonates so deeply. It's like, I just want to show you that I understand, like I don't know how to describe to you how much your love means to me as a young man, and it's so fulfilling when I can just get over the anger, the frustration, not with her, really with myself, and give myself some compassion. And there was, the only thing other than that was like my dad calling me from another holy place. It's Imam Hussein's holy shrine, and same thing. It was like late night there, early morning for us, and he's I just want to call you, man, let you know I love you. This was like maybe weeks before he passed, and it felt so similar in that it just takes all excess stuff that I think I carried. And really my whole plan was just to like thank them for their sacrifice, but through that I grew pain and frustration, and it felt like I could never do enough. But the problem was there was no expectation to begin with. I put that shit on myself, right? So genuinely the only person to be mad at was myself. So therefore, like, the compassion in the book is a sort of a redirection, you know? And I think, yeah.
Yeah. And this moment you describe of the phone call with your mom, like, and the phone call with your dad, I feel that. And the question that you asked a little bit offhand was like, well, if I can feel this love, what do I need to write the book for? Right? And there's truth in that, for sure, right? Yes. Like always, I think writing a book is a process of seeking.
Yes.
And so when we get fulfilled, it's like, I don't know. I already got to the goal. I just got to the goal.
Yeah.
And at the same time, when you're in that place, that's when the story can become a gift that you can give freely, right? Because you're not holding the expectations of what that gift is supposed to give back to you.
That's exactly when I submitted my first book. Because I was just like, well, I got what I wanted.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody else can benefit from it.
Yeah.
Genuinely. And I can't tell you how many people still reach out and be like, oh my God, dude, I can't tell you, just turning on my faucet today made me feel grateful for my life, or just seeing my dad made me feel grateful for life, or so the gift just keeps giving, and his energy is like touches these people, and I know it does, you know. And that is the ultimate gift. That's the ultimate healing, because it keeps coming back and like that remedy, you know. And that's why I think this story deserves to be told, and it deserves to be, because I really think I've come full circle. And like, when I started just 2 years ago, you know, a year and a half ago, I was like, okay, I'm writing, you know, all these things, and I have this idea, Garden Warrior, and this thing, and then it was like Mom, and it was like, oh, how do I do this? How do I get to this bridge? How do I build it? How do I get there? And I tried, and I think by letting go and like just kind of enjoying this new energy of building and creating, and now just this conversation alone has done more for me than I think. You guys, I'm trying to tell you. This is what I'm trying to tell you. This amazing woman, you are that gift for so many of us. And I know this conversation, I know there's going to be a lot of people watching it. They're going to enjoy it. If anything, I'm going to enjoy it, and I'm going to rewatch it. And this is why I want to do this work. This is like, I don't care to scale. I don't care to, you know, like keep building whatever. Like, I'm going to be okay. But if I could keep doing this with other people like yourself, man, what a gift. Yeah. What a cool way to start building the garden of wisdom. You know, and like, what a way to tie this into who my father was, and how I use elements of who my mother is, and elements of who my brothers are. And for me, there's nothing richer than using these experiences and bringing them to conversations. You know, you made me cry. And I had a feeling something like that was going to happen today, and but I'm grateful it did. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys didn't know I was going to get a whole therapy session. This is why I brought donuts, by the way. I don't know if they're good anymore.
Party.
This thing's off. We're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Seriously.
When I was studying with the Organic Intelligence program, which is like therapy. I wasn't studying as a therapist, but I was just studying to boost my skills. And when we would practice and give sessions with each other, the running joke was always like, you give one, you get one. Like nobody gets to go that deep and not have themselves impacted too. So
yes.
thank you.
My God. Yeah, I love you, sister. Thank you. Seriously. All right, what a way to end the show.